Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the MRC Mega Team vs Team competition for February 2021. And today we're looking at Lobby C in the opening round of what is set to be a feisty competition and series of races over the next 4 weeks. I'm your host, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, depends on what media you follow me on, and we're here, it's midday at Tsukuba in Japan, and we're running around in a rather feisty little set of cute and cuddly Renault Clio V6s from the year 2000. Well, I shouldn't say cute and cuddly perhaps, but more carnagey if it goes all wrong, in the fact that we're a very tight circuit, and all of our drivers here will be looking to kick off their campaigns in this team versus team series with a good set of results. Now, of course, the big question, what is this series all about? Why does this series exist? And why is it so important for all the different teams? Let's take you step by step through that. So, the principle of this is that this is a team versus team competition. There are 3 lobbies tonight ongoing. There's Lobby A, Lobby B and Lobby C. Lobbies A and B have also got their own respective live commentators, but our focus here is on Lobby C today. And good evening to those of you tuning in already, and I hope you're all doing well and having a good start to your week, whether it be Monday evening, including CP Racing from Drivers Room and Zeronic, who have tuned in and can't shake the cliche. Hope you're doing well. And everyone else, we'll come back to the chat very shortly. But the purpose of this series is essentially to get a number of different GT Sport teams across the GT Sport globe, particularly across EMEA, but also in the wider regions, and bring them all together for a little community championship. There are some prizes at stake here. Those prizes are still to be finalised, but what you can imagine is it's not just about, say, a small valuable prize in terms of where it's monetary or a little trophy or something along those lines, but it's also about being the best team out of a whole set of teams that have competed in this championship. Now, we do have, in this series, 21 different teams taking part. Each team has 2 representatives, so you can imagine 42 drivers as split across 21 teams. The idea is that each week there will be a set of lobbies. The opening week, which you're seeing tonight, is 3 lobbies A, B and C as I've previously described, whereby each lobby is just a random distribution of drivers from that pool of 42. The idea being that depending on where our drivers place tonight will determine which lobby or which bracket they move into for the subsequent week, as we say hello to Plux the Duck as well. So, in this lobby there are going to be a total of 14 drivers when we do get underway, and the idea is that the top 7 drivers will progress to the top bracket, so they will move to what is the upper echelon of the remainder of the competition. So they're going to have more points up for grabs potentially, and the opportunity to potentially progress towards the grand finale, which is round number 4, which is the Lancia Stratos race, where our final 5 drivers will be racing there. Those who finish in the bottom 7 tonight in the race will end up falling into the bottom bracket, where they will be in the lower division of drivers and that lower split. But of course, every driver could accumulate points for their team over the course of the rounds, but you want to be in that top bracket to have the greater potential of accumulating more points. So that's the idea tonight. Effectively, as we say hello to Flapjack as well, our drivers here want to get the most they can out of this race and make sure that by the end of the 30-minute race, they are the ones that finish in P1 through to P7, so they progress into that top bracket. Following that, when we get into rounds 2, 3 and 4, we will start to see knockout races, which is that a certain number of drivers will be going home after each week. And to give you an idea, I won't go over it too much today because I think it would be inappropriate to elaborate on this too heavily. But as we go through our crib notes, those drivers in round 2 who finish in the bottom 5 of their respective lobbies will be eliminated. And when they go into round number 3, so that's week number 3, the bottom 6 will be eliminated in the top bracket. Those in the bottom bracket, there'll be no eliminations. It will simply be a case that's the final standings. Because the 4th and final round, which is the Lancia Stratos race at the end of February, will be for only our 5 finalists, our top 5 drivers who have made it into the top bracket and made it through all the elimination stages. Now, in terms of schedule for tonight, I'm giving you an overview of what it's all about and what the overall championship will play like. We've got just shy of 10 minutes to go before we get qualifying underway. At the hour, so at 2100 if you're UTC or GMT, as I am here. We'll be getting underway with a 10-minute qualifying session, and then after 10 minutes we go straight into a 30-minute race and we get underway. But now let's introduce the car that we're driving today, as we see Fubuki 2007, who we'll refer to as Fubuki, going round. We are all seeing and all driving in Clio V6s tonight, where all of our drivers will have to master the rotation of this mid-engine rear-wheel drive car from the year 2000, which has a good amount of grunt within it, what of its engine. But the fact our drivers are going to be running on sports tyres, of which they have sports softs all the way through to sports hards available to them. The idea is that they want to get the best possible turn into the corners and essentially slide that rear weight into the corners. The car will come loose under braking and turning, as you can see Fubuki there through turn 1, and having the rear end come out on him and oversteering. And that's what these cars are all about. They're going to slide as you go into a corner, and it's about mastering that slide and getting the car to stabilise upon exit. That's going to make the brake a lap. And the Clio V6 is a fun little car. You normally see it in a whole variety of little championships in real life and also in the sim racing community. These are cars that you see in a lot of little Clio Cups, for example. Those are the typical names that are given to little Sunday Cups, but can also lead to the preceding steps towards touring car or things on those lines. And we can see that we've also got Scrabo in the chat. Hello to Scrabo, and hope you're doing well. And indeed, have been practicing for DRTT, Craig, but that's beside the point for today, of course. Because now, let's start to introduce the drivers. Now, we've got representatives from a whole variety of teams here, and different communities across the GT Sport world. We start off then by introducing P1 Timberlake, who, as I understand it, is represented today, and we've got so many names here, representing P1 Racing, of course. I'll come back to why I'm a little bit mixed up on the P1 drivers in a second, because there is one P1 driver here tonight who represents a different community. But P1 Timberlake, who has just hopped to the pit, is here representing P1 Racing. We've also got Marky Boy 92, who's here today representing the community known as Club 100. So the Club 100 team here being represented by the British driver. We've then got Daco 1993 from Croatia, who is hanging around at the moment as a representative of what would be the GTHR community. Then we've got Moz, who's making his way into turns 2, 3 and up into 4 right now with the Duckham deliveried Renault Clio. And he is representing the team known as DM Sim Racing. Then we've got Gaz, who has just jumped down the time sheets. There's Gaz from the United Kingdom, door number 39, who is going to be representing tonight. So I've got a massive list of drivers' names here, folks. That's why there's a little bit of delay. He's representing the TRG community. And then we have one H Racing Green 91. In that wonderful livery car, who is representing the SBR community. Very nice livery there. A little bit of a play on the John Paul special. And then we've got NXGN's Hero Karam, who's representing XGM, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yep, Next Gen Racing he's representing tonight. And as we continue through, we've then got Racing Snake, the British driver here, who is representing the WP Racing Team, sorry, the MP Racing Team, I should say. That's not a W, that is an M. And then we head over to a Noodlester 9, the British driver here, who's just setting at a personal best at the moment, and he is representing the team known as Flat Out E Racing, the clean, fair, and competitive team. And then we've got Jev Kuska, a person who I personally know very well from the Drivers Room community, and that's who he is representing tonight, the Drivers Room community. And then we've got P1 Aldo, who's currently sat in the pits. And P1 Aldo, whilst he has a P1 tag here, he represents the Digital Car Culture magazine community. So anyone who follows Digital Car Culture, and you'll know that recently they released a new edition, which covered a rather interesting topic around the GTSR rail racing community as part of their recent issue. That's P1 Aldo there, representing DCC. And then we have got Ben Cosgrove, who is representing, as we just look through, My sincere apologies, folks. I can't seem to find his name on my sheet at the moment. I think he might be standing in for another driver, so we will come back to you about that. And then we've already introduced Marky Boy 92. Pardon me. And I can definitely recommend Digital Car Culture is a fantastic read, as we are really just now counting down the minutes. But whilst we're doing so, and I'm just double checking to make sure I haven't made a mistake with regards to Ben. No, we definitely have not made a mistake. I can't see Ben's name on the sheet here, so he may be standing in for another driver at short notice, but I will get that clarified for you as soon as possible, if I can. But in terms of the lap then, so you can see lap times are already being set in the region of a 1 minute and 5, and all of our drivers opt in for the sports soft tyres. I get the feeling that our drivers are going to go for this compound because it is the fastest compound out of the soft, medium and hard available, and whilst it will not have the life of the medium or the hard, the lap time that our drivers will gain from the grippier tyre by comparison to the other two compounds will offset the potential number of pit stops they need to make. Now, we do have tyre and fuel consumption being modelled as part of these races. We've got a tyre wear of ×3 and a fuel depletion of ×5. And what I suspect that will mean is that over the course of the 30-minute race, our drivers will need to refuel at least once, and we are going to potentially see at least one tyre change, if not two. We do not have any mandatory compounds tonight. And the other thing that is worth noting is that these settings also apply to qualifying. So in our 10-minute qualifying session, you have that quandary to deal with. Do you go for, say, a banker lap on full fuel and a fresh set of tyres, and then proceed to start trying to burn off some fuel and go for some faster laps later on? Or do you decide to do a lot of fuel burning early on in your qualifying session, and then you have to try and set a time on a much lighter car, which is expected to be faster in terms of lap time, but then of course you have that time pressure on you, and also you have to try and find yourself some clear space on track, which at Tsukuba, given the size of this track, well, its limited size and total of 9 primary corners. If you look at some circuit maps, the reason I say 9 primary corners is because, as we see, Adako going very sideways there, out of 7 into 8, and Hatalad has had to park off circuit. And we'll introduce him actually very shortly. I say primary corners because there are multiple corners, which also certain corners which are broken up into sub-corners, but I normally refer to it as a total of 9 turns here. That's one of the quandaries that our drivers will have to deal with, is the fact finding that space out on circuit over the course of 9 corners can be very difficult to do. As I've personally experienced in FIA races before around here, where you literally try and find a bit of clear air and then you end up tripping over another driver, or you have someone trip over the back of your car. And Hatalad, who we should just introduce, by the way, is here today representing the team known as ESR, Eldar Sim Racing, and we should also introduce Fubuki, who I'm not sure, is he out on track at the moment, our lobby host for tonight, and so our lead steward, Fubuki from the United Kingdom, who is representing the Sim FX racing community. So we've got a huge variety of drivers here, and also we've got P1 Timberlake representing the P1 community, as I mentioned earlier. And I believe, yep, we've just had it confirmed. Thank you very much, CP Racing. We have had it confirmed, folks, that Ben Cosgrove tonight is representing the MRC racing community. So those are all of our drivers introduced. And of course, be sure to let me know in the chat of this Twitch stream who you are here to support tonight, if you are here to support anyone, or if you're just tuning in because you're interested to see what's happened. That's good as well. It's always good. And I, of course, am not playing favourites, even though I belong to one particular community amongst the drivers here. I will not be playing favourites tonight in terms of commentary or who we'll be keeping our eyes on. Everybody deserves their fair share, and everybody's got a good chance of doing very well tonight, given the fact that it is neutral ground. A lot of our drivers will not have raced amongst one another before, so everybody will be going into this one effectively blind in terms of what to expect, although a number of our drivers may have had practice sessions of their own. But in this final practice session before qualifying, we've only got a minute and a half to go. It looks as though the pace is being set by Marky Boy 92 with a 1 minute and 5 second lap, a 1:05.520, as he returns to the pits there. And, well, with a lap around here, I would expect that we're going to get about 3 to 5 flying laps in from our drivers. 3, I think, would be the call if you wanted to try and burn a bit of fuel. So I would personally go out early, try and get in a banker lap, then come in after doing quite a bit of fuel burning. Probably then try to do a little bit more fuel burning before I set my second flying lap. And then once I feel happy with my second flying lap, try and do some more fuel burning and then go for that final lap right at the end of the qualifying session. Now, some of you may be wondering as well, what about slipstream? How's that going to play into this? Personally, Tsukuba, given the cars we're going around in at the moment and the fact they're very rotation happy and also the fact you've got that dirty air to contend with, I think Slipstream could be valuable if you're able to pick up the toe when coming out of what is turn 5, so the right-hander before you get that double left into the hairpin at turn 8, and then you've got the long run down to the final corner at turn 9. You want to pick up the Slipstream on the second half of the lap because that's where the acceleration zones, the extended acceleration zones appear. As we can see, Hatalad is getting a bit of an experience riding behind Dako, going into turn 4 right now, and he's probably using that to just get himself attuned to how the Clio's going to feel under braking and turning in the dirty air of another car, as TRG Gaz is following onto this little train as well. So all of our drivers using one another here just to get a little bit of extra data. But if you can get some slipstream in the second half of the lap, it's going to bode very well, I think, for your qualifying lap. If so long as you don't mess up your braking into one of these hairpins and end up trying to ping-pong into a driver who's ahead of you, of course, which can happen if you get it wrong. But whilst we are counting down, we've had the call now, so we've had a good luck from everyone shout out. We are getting underway with qualifying, folks. So, 10 minutes. Who's going to be on top by the end of it? It's anyone's guess, but I'm sure we'll find out very soon, as all of our drivers get ready to go on their Sports Soft tyres. So our first drivers then coming out of the pits will be, I believe it's going to be Fubuki, who's going to lead our drivers out of the pits. Yep, it is indeed. And as he comes out of turn 1, then we can see Noodlestir's gone for the hard tyre in the pits. That very likely means that Noodlestir will be starting on the hard compound, and we would expect that after 1 or 2 laps, he might do a couple of fuel burning laps, he will be going into the pits and putting on some Sports Soft, because the hard tyre typically costs you about 2 seconds on a handling circuit such as this compared to the soft, and it'll cost you at least 1 second by comparison with the medium. As we say hello to pgib_92 in the stream chat, who is rooting for Hirokram tonight. But as we keep our eyes on Fubuki at the moment, you can see all of our field are breaking out, although we do have one driver who's still sat in the pit. But I think all of our drivers are going to charge up towards turn 8, and then they'll try and space out from one another, albeit some could be trying to ride for the slipstream. But we're going to hop on board with the SimFX racing driver of Fubuki as he makes his way out of turn 9 and begins the lap, and we'll take you through it. So, coming out of the final corner then, wanting to stay in 4th gear by the looks of things to avoid an unnecessary upshift, because remember we've got manual gearboxes here. Come up in towards turn 1 then, going to be braking down hard here, staying in 3rd gear initially, but then using the downshift to 2nd gear to help rotate the car into the corner before a quick upshift into 3rd. You'll notice that he's used that in order to get the car stabilised. And now coming through turns 2 and 3, he's probably going to do the same once again. Brake hard, downshift towards 2nd, and then once he gets the car fully turned through the corner, do a rapid upshift into 3rd. And there we go, up into 3rd. And now into turn 5 here, more of a lift corner rather than a brake corner. You don't want to brake for turn 5 if you can help it. Avoid some of that tyre wear and losing your momentum. You chuck the car into 5, then follow it through into 6, 7. And now braking hard for the third of the hairpins at turn 8. And then we've got one more extended long hairpin, you could argue, at turn 9. But that's the 3rd primary hairpin. And now charging down the straight here. It's all about getting that good run off of turn 8, which Fubuki's got a reasonable run, but I think there's some time to be gained here. As he's charging up towards turn 9, he's just going to throw the car in 4th gear here, lifting off and applying a tiny bit of brake there, a tiny bit of trail braking, just to get the car hooked in and going down to 3rd there. I think he felt the car was starting to understeer off the corner a bit, and that is his opening lap, which is a 106.1, and we see Gaz setting a 106.4, then we've got Hatalad up into a 106.3, Hirokram already up into the 105.7s. Goodness me, that is a very fast lap from the British driver, and we haven't even got a couple of minutes of the qualifying session out of the way before we're jumping down to those 105s that we saw in practice. And all of our drivers coming through on their laps at the moment. We can see that Ben Cosgrove going up into what is currently a provisional P8 with that 106.6. So it looks as though we're looking at mid to low 105s for our pole times tonight, as we've got even more drivers coming through at the moment. And we're just going to quickly flick through it, and we can see the P1 driver of Timberlake on what is a 105.7 as well. Only 200ths separating provisional P1 and provisional P2 right now. And Marky Boy up in the mix as well with that 105.8. As you can see that Marky Boy picking up a half-second penalty there, and I get the feeling that's going to be for track limits. Probably cutting across an apex somewhere around the circuit, whether it'll be off a turn 4, 5 or 6. That's where you'll normally pick up a half-second penalty, as we follow Marky Boy through here. And he's going charging down towards the final corner once again to try and improve. But of course, with the way things have played out so far, he's not going to improve too much, as Gaz improves to a 106.3. And we can see that Timberlake here coming out. He was blue Timberlake after Sector 2, it should be pointed out, because he was in the slipstream of another car, but he's had to drop away from that one and it hasn't worked out. Racing Snake going up to a 106.7, and I don't think we've actually introduced Racing Snake. We'll come around to Mr. Snake very shortly. And we should point out actually the 79 driver here, Racing Snake 79, on that 106.7 currently in provisional P11, although he is improving. And you can see all of our drivers are clustering up a little bit right now, trying to get a little bit of slipstream off of one another here, just to gain a little bit of lap time in those acceleration zones and those straights, as P1 Aldo from the DCC community is right behind him out on circuit at the moment. They're all coming through. Will Racing Snake get another personal best here coming through Sector 2? No, he's dropped a lot of time actually from turns 4 and 5, and that means that this lap does not look as though it's going to be a major improvement. But behind him right now, we do see that Aldo is following after him, the Digital Car Culture Club driver here, chasing after him at the moment. And well, Moz pulling out the way. I think Moz is lifting off here to do a bit of fuel burning and simply get himself out of traffic, as we've got half a qualifying session left to go. Let's see if Aldo does improve as he goes into the final corner. Hatalad improving to a 106.2, which is moving him further up the field and probably into the top 7 right now in terms of time. As we can see all our drivers come through, and we see that Aldo does improve to a 107.0, but it is not a place improvement, only a time improvement. So he's still provisional P12, but we can see that the fastest lap is now owned by H Racing Green with that 105.743, as he does not improve on this fast lap. And Hirokram right now only a tiny bit off, only 200 separating literally P2 and P1 at the moment. In fact, between P1 and P3, it's less than half a tenth. This shows you how close it is between some of the drivers right now, and I think that's how it's going to play out. I think it's literally going to be nip and tuck to the final flying lap in terms of who is on the top row of the grid, because otherwise at the moment it could be anyone's guess who's going to be out there, as Hirokram comes into the pits and he's going to be putting on a fresh set of tyres. And our drivers here will not be resetting to the pits by quitting out, which is the FIA tactic, which saves you time, because to do so I believe will actually remove you from qualifying and remove you from the ability to race, as we've experienced in some other series and witnessed in the past. As Daco improves to 105.8, so Daco the Croatian moving up into provisional P4, as we can see that Marky Boy improving and cementing his hold on that provisional P5 for that 105.8, but he's going to need to get out of the way of the guy behind him, the P1 driver of Timberlake, and he's flashing his lights there to say to Timberlake, I'm getting out of the way, as he has done the reset. Actually, he's got himself back in the pits. So as they're all coming through once again with just under 4 minutes to go, right now it is looking as though it could be anybody's. Well, I mean, the top 5 are separated in qualifying by under a tenth. So any one of our top 5 right now could be up there. And it's worth noting that Kuska, after a couple of laps, has set a 106.1. That was on his 3rd lap out. Kuska right now very close to challenging Fubuki for that provisional P6, only 400ths off, but he's pushing as hard as he can, of course, as all of our drivers are. And I think Kuska's one of the ones who you want to watch out for in the race. He does try and get the most out of the car in qualifying, from what I know, but at the same time in the race he is very feisty in race conditions, as we see TRG's Gaz has moved up into provisional P6 for 106.0, almost getting into those 105s. It is very close to getting into those 105s for the TRG driver. He's just got to find a little bit more time, and of course if he can burn some fuel out of the car, then he'll definitely be seeing those 105s should he absolutely nail the lap. And that's one of the things as well will be on the minds of our drivers right now. Some of them will be qualifying drivers, i.e. they'll love to do qualifying laps more than they will to do races. Some of our drivers will be targeting just getting towards that front row as Hatalad gets out of the way of Hirokram. Other drivers here will be looking to get themselves towards the front, so in the upper half of the grid, but they won't be too bothered if they miss out on pole. If they end up starting, say, P4 or P6, they'll feel that they've got a better chance in the race. But of course, with Tsukuba being a very tight and narrow circuit, you want the best possible qualifying position here, ideally, because there's not that many overtaking spots, and the ones that exist are the hairpins really, so turns 1, 4 and 8, although you can get the run into 9 if you get a really good launch out of 8. As we can see all of our drivers then with 2 minutes to go, still making their way around as quickly as possible in order to try and get as many more laps in. And really now I think we're going to be seeing 2 more flying laps from the majority of our drivers, and perhaps 1 from anybody who is on a late one, such as Fubuki. He's only going to get 1 more flying lap, as I understand it, because he'll need to do this out lap and then get in that flyer with just under 2 minutes to go. And we have not seen any change at the moment in terms of who's on that front row, as Moz 1978 improves to a 106.2. So Moz making himself making its way up into provisional P9, having been further back, and it is chop and change, and it should be pointed out, it is very close right now across the whole grid. I mean, I was saying earlier about the fact, as like, well, goodness me, I was saying it was close, and Marky Boy improves to a 105.525, separated himself from the rest of the field by 2/10 for that provisional P1. Marky Boy on a charge right now, and definitely leaving his marquee on the field. But as we can see, Racing Green, meanwhile, is going to be trying to challenge that. He's not improving in the first sector. He's lost 300s compared to his own personal best. So I think if he's going to be improving, it'll be on the next lap, and that will be his final lap of this qualifying session. And Marky Boy right now really raising the bar in a way, as Gaz improves to 105.8. So Gaz now up into provisional P6 here as we look further around. And we can see with under a minute to go now, a good number of our drivers will be coming onto their final lap if they're not already on it. As we look around the field, and we're just trying to see as Ben Cosgrove improves to a 106.2, putting in provisional P11, and we do see a little bit of chop and change up towards the top of the field. Well, it looks like there's chop and change on our timing screens, but in fact there was no change. It's just simply people being reset around the circuit and some lap times and sector times refreshing on our screens. As we can see, H Racing Green coming across the line and not improving there as he now proceeds on to his final lap. But it's very close here, and we can see that Daco has moved up into provisional P5 and is currently on a best. In fact, he's the fastest driver out on circuit, is Daco, the Croatian here, a couple hundredths up compared to Marky Boy's time after Sector 2. Now, will he be able to nail this at the end of the lap? We have got some drivers who are going to be coming through to complete their laps as well, but we'll just stay with Daco here because this could be a contest for the pole position, and we'll keep our eyes on the timing screen to see if anybody ahead of him is improving. So Daco coming into the final corner, then going a little bit wide initially, but catching it nicely, going for a later apex as we see Fubuki improves to a 106.0, and Daco comes across here, and it's a personal best of a 105.6, putting in provisional P2. But does Ben Cosgrove improve at all? No, he does not. Meanwhile, behind we've got Moz coming across the line, not improving. Racing Snake not improving either. Hero Cram not improving. So it's all settling down. Hatterlad coming across, and no improvement from the Mad Hatter. And then we've got P1 Aldo coming across, no improvement from him, nor from Timberlake. And I think really as a couple more come across, Racing Green, no improvement from him. And Marky Boy, I think, has done it then, ladies and gentlemen, as Cusker comes across and does not improve. We've got one more driver out there right now who's looking to finish off, and that is the Noodlester 9 car, and he does not improve here. So qualifying is over, and pole goes to Marky Boy 92, or 105.525. So it's time for the race, ladies and gentlemen. 30 minutes of action in the Clios. Who's going to come out on top by the end of it? It's anybody's guess. But as we wind down to the grid then, on the right of your picture, it's Marky Boy. On the left, it's Daco. But behind them, H Racing Green and Hero Cran from NXGN. But keep an eye out from the P1 driver of Timberlake in P5. What can he do from further down the grid as we go for this standing start? And it's the lights out, and away they go. And all of our drivers getting a relatively good start, although it looks as though TRG Gaz has actually bottomed out on the start there and lost quite a bit of momentum in the run-up towards turn 1. That means some drivers may go for an early move, although Gaz does look to be going defensive, as we can see. Trying to go around the outside of him is Fubuki into turn 1. Fubuki hasn't made it stick, and in fact, he's dropped back a little bit as a result of that. So no real moves or gains into turn 1. But now coming up into turn 4, all of our drivers with heavy cars, heavy fuel loads, and cold tyres, and Hatterlad going for a huge send on Jeff Cusker into turn 4, and it hasn't worked out. In fact, he backed out, but you could see that he realised that he was turning his car into a bit of a mini torpedo. But a nice try from Hatterlad there, showing the respect and knowing the brakes on that Clio very well, knowing what he can and can't do in the car. As they all come up towards turn 8, everybody keeping it nice and clean so far, albeit there hasn't been too much change in terms of positions. As they come out of turn 8, nobody going for a big send move at this point in time. Although Cusker, I say that, actually I think has gone for a huge send there, has made his way up into P7 against Fubuki, but in return now in the drag race down to turn 9, Cusker's going to try and hold that inside line, which he has the right to do so here. He's going to try and make Fubuki go all the way around, but Fubuki, I think, is confident at this point, and he can close the door by cutting across the front of Cusker, which is out. So after one lap, it is Marky Boy ahead of Daco, followed by Hero Cram, and then H Racing Green, then Timberlake behind. We've got Gaz in P6 right now, Fubuki behind him, and we can see in the rear view camera shot, we've got Cusker being pressured a little bit by Hatterlad, who's being engaged by Moz in return. Moz in P10 right now. We've got Ben Cosgrove in P11, then Racing Snake in P12. We've got Aldo in 13th, and then rear of the field at the moment is Noodlester, as they all come down towards turn 4 for the second time of asking. And Daco's still holding on right now, but it does look as though Daco feels a little bit out of position right now in terms of pace. The guys behind him are pushing hard, and Daco finds himself falling just that little bit off of Marky Boy. So Marky Boy is using this as an opportunity to try and make a break away from the field. And in fact, we have had a major incident. Gaz has gone very deep there. What on earth has happened? We'll find out very shortly for you folks, but you can see that Daco's still being pressured heavily by Hero Cram as they come up towards turn 9 once again. And I think at this point, Hero is just trying to test Daco and seeing, okay, well, given the fact that we've got a lot of mileage left to go, what is Daco weak at and what is he strong at? And he seems to have gone deep into turn 9. He's caught it this time, but once some tyre wear starts kicking in, that will be an exploitable mistake. And as they come towards turn 1 one more time, it looks as though, well, going on the inside is H Racing Green, but Hero Crown was aware of that. I think H Racing Green was just tapping his nose in there. He wasn't really going for a big move at all, but whilst that was all going on, we can see further back, Timberlake at the moment from P1 is in from the P1 team, I should say, is still in P5, holding on for dear life, and Fabuki has moved up into P6. And what has happened to Gaz? He has dropped a long way down the field. In fact, he's all the way down in P11. Let's find out. So as we ride on board with Gazden, he was coming on lap number 2, he was coming out of turn 5 here, and we saw him go full send across the grass out of 5, and it looks as though he's gone wrong, so he's gone back into 6 here, and then I think he's going to go out on the grass, and the car's just going to get sent across the road. He does a little bit of rally cross, and as we jump away from his camera, he did a very good job of collecting the car there, but he's found himself out of position, and he's lost the momentum. So Gaz shown us his rally cross skills, definitely, but in return, he's lost out a good number of places because of all that. And whilst we were looking at the replay, we can see that the gap between Daco and Marky Boy has increased over the course of this lap alone by a further 8 tenths on the lap, and Hirokram at the moment is biding his time behind Daco, but I think a move is going to be coming soon, simply because at this point in the race, unless Daco is doing a huge amount of car management, it's as if Daco is causing a little bit of a cork in the bottle syndrome moment where he's just simply holding everybody up. But as we look further around, and to be fair, Daco may be playing this to his advantage and thinking, I only need to finish in the top 7 today to get into the top split or the top tier, the upper echelons of this competition, so that's what we'll be targeting. And we can see that Cusker at the moment in P7 holding off Hatalad, and Fabuki just ahead of him, and Fabuki trying to make a little bit of a breakaway, but all of our drivers keeping it calm right now. And I think everybody's sizing one another up. It's one of those moments in these races, again, as I said at the start of today's program, the thing about these drivers is most of them will not have raced with one another before, so they won't know what each driver's like. Are they aggressive in defending? Are they aggressive in overtaking? Do they like to conserve the car? Are they a tyre maestro? As we can see in the battle for P4, we've got H Racing Green battling with Hero Cram as they come up in towards turn 9. He's trying to go for the move as Green, but Hero Cram knows he can shut the door because he's got so much of a car ahead of H Racing Green. There wasn't that major overlap, and I think, again, Green was just sizing up Hero Cram there and waiting to see what he could go away for. As we say hello to Alurba and also Hepburn in the chat there, and MS as well, as Racing Green goes for the move on the inside on Hero Cram, and that was a very adventurous move for P3, and you can see that Timberlake is going to try and follow through as a result, and I think that's caught Hero Cram by surprise, but then Green has backed out of it. I think what Green realises, it was a bit of a push to pass, or he feels that way because he's backed out of it completely, and it's all changed in terms of the fact that now Timberlake is up into P4, and we're just going to take a look back at what happened there in terms of that move. So he's coming out of turn 9 on lap number 4, then coming up in towards turn 5, into lap 5 I should say, going into turn 1. I think he went for the send here into the first corner, but as he went in there was contact, and you could see that he's just gone in too hard, has Racing Green, and that's why he backed out so heavily from the position once they cleared the corner and got some space out in circuit. I think what Racing Green realised is that whilst it was a good attempt at a move, it was too aggressive a move, and that would be frowned upon by the stewards, so as a result he decided to back out of it and give the place back, and he hasn't really lost too much. Yes, he's lost a position on track right now, but in terms of being in that fight for P2, he hasn't lost any time, so they're still in this, and that means that Green feels as though perhaps he can go to war against Hero Cram into turn 1. He recognises that the NXGN driver may be a bit weak in terms of defending his line into turn 1 or not anticipating moves into that corner from so far back, but it was good backing off there. And as we look further back through the field, we can see that in the battle for P10 right now, Cosgrove is holding off Gaz at a very good rate of knots here, and whilst he was a bit slow in qualifying compared to Gaz qualifying much further up the field, you can see that Gaz is having a bit of a difficult time finding his way through his fellow countrymen, in the fact that Cosgrove right now is just keeping it planted, keeping it smart and sensible out on the circuit, and it means that he's able to chase after the guys in P9 and P8, but in return he's holding a good amount of space to Gaz. Now, of course, the question will be, when can we expect our drivers to pit? Well, it could be anyone's guess at the moment, but as we flick in terms of information, we flick over to the onboard telemetries, we can see these Sport Soft tyres do have a very gradual wear rate. So at the moment, as Marky Boy comes around to complete his 6th lap, there is no sign of a pit stop in sight in the near future. I reckon you'll probably be looking at a pit stop towards the final 10 minutes of this race. Perhaps our drivers will pit halfway through, but and that's just for the tyres I'm talking about, not the fuel here. But as we go on to lap number 7, Daco once again going quite defensive into turn 1, and it just means that right now Marky Boy is able to creep away. But of course, this could be all part of Daco's plan to save some fuel and save the car and make it go long. So Daco may be playing some mind games here and hoping that the guys behind him simply trip over one another and start fighting a lot. We've already seen some fighting form from Racing Green right now, and it could be the case that in fact Timberlake goes for a move in the near future. Further back, we can see that Fubuki holding on to that P6, just keeping a good amount of space to Kuska right now, and Kuska not going too aggressive, as we can see that battle for P2 in the camera shot, the lead of the camera shot there, really clustering up into turn 8. And we're just going to very briefly hop on board with some of the telemetry data with regards to fuel and tyre levels here, as asked by you guys in the chat. So we can see that our leader right now, Marky Boy, at 75% fuel and just a little bit of graining on those left-hand tyres. Behind him, behind him, Hirokram going for the move there on Daco, and that was a move going into turn 9. So we're going to come back to the telemetry very shortly. We're just going to see what happened there in terms of that move as we flick back. So he had the run into turn 9 there. He had the drag race versus Daco. I think here he just committed to it. Daco realised he couldn't close the door compared to what happened previously, and he got the move done. So he'd been setting that up for some time. But as we flip back to the data, then we can see that Hirokram and Daco both on very similar amounts of fuel and tyre life right now. Then behind them, we've got Timberlake, who's lost a little bit more fuel. He's used up about 2% more fuel by comparison to the guys in front of him, but similar tyre life. And it's the same with Racing Green. Fubuki, meanwhile, behind him on about the same once again as the guys in front in P4 and P5. Kuska also on the same, and Kuska actually being quite aggressive to his front tyres in particular. You see that front left has actually had a bit of a knock in terms of wear compared to the other tyres we looked at so far. Hatalad on a similar amount of tyre wear, but using a lot more fuel, in fact revving out that Clio to its full heart's content. And then behind him you've got Moz, who's on a similar amount of fuel but barely any tyre wear, so he's doing a lot of tyre saving, is Moz by the looks of things. And then we've got Cosgrove, who's on quite a nice amount of fuel and very little tyre wear, and Gaz behind him using a lot of fuel right now, trying to find a way back into that fight for the midfield and trying to get back up towards P6, which is where he was at the start. We've got Racing Snake, who is on a very well managed car at the moment but not making too much ground. Aldo in a similar state, and then right at the back is Noodlester, who is on a very good amount of fuel, but he's a long way off the pace here. And I think for Noodle, this is just more of a break-in and a test session at the moment. But as we look back up the field and move away from the telemetry data there, we can see that with all of our drivers only having used 25% fuel so far, we're not expecting any drivers to pit for fuel. So this is only going to be a race to pit for tyres if they need to pit at all. I suspect there may be some emergency pit stops if our drivers start having to go very aggressive. But other than that, we might be seeing sprints all the way to the end from all of our drivers here. And no change in terms of positions since we're looking through the telemetry data right now. As we're all coming up towards turn number 9, then we can see that Marky Boy, the gap between Marky Boy and Hirokram actually started to stabilise and come down a little bit. I think Hiro has managed to get the pace on now that he's got past Daco, and I think that's what's been holding up the NXGN driver, is the fact that he had the Croatian in front of him who just wasn't driving to the same pace as him at the time. As we can see, Racing Green going very deep there into turn 1, but getting a huge amount of momentum on the acceleration out of it, and Timberlake getting it very wrong coming out of the corner. You can see the car started to get very unsettled. Behind them, of course, Fubuki right now 2.6 seconds back on Racing Green in the gap from P6 to P5, and Kuska just staying at about 0.9 of a second to a whole second behind Fubuki here. And Hatalad, the man who's on a mission right now and using quite a lot of fuel, I think he's trying to chase after Kuska and apply some pressure, and you can see Hatalad is really pushing the threshold in terms of the car's grip there coming out of turn 5. So I think the one to watch at the moment, the man on a mission, because he'll want to get himself into that top 7 by the end of tonight's race to go up into the top split for round number 2, will be Hatalad, and Kuska just needs to be a little bit aware of this, as does Fubuki, with both drivers just managing their cars. As we look further down, we can see that Moz a bit further back in terms of this whole situation. But all of our drivers right now, I think, just settling into a rhythm and just waiting to see when somebody's going to make a mistake or who's going to flinch first in terms of trying to go for the move or pushing hard. Because this, in a way, you can imagine that this has started to break up into something like a cycling race in a way, in the fact that all of our drivers are in packs at the moment, but they'll be looking to break away from their respective packs at certain time. Hirokram has already gone for it in terms of getting away from the P3 to P5 battle because he knows he's got the pace to chase after Marky Boy. And in fact, on the last lap, his previous lap, which was a very fast lap, that 105.8, almost as good as his fastest lap, that 105.7, which belongs to him right now with just under 19 minutes to go. Hirokram is trying to close that gap down to Marky Boy, and of course every position matters tonight in terms of the points that our drivers will get from each race, but you want to finish in that top 7 to get even more points when you go into those later rounds and that opportunity to be in the grand final. But as we move away from our guys battling for the lead right now, and in fact we are going to hop on board and look back from what is Dako's car as we jump to the rear view and look from the rear gunning view. Dako's lap times are indicative of someone who's not quite there in terms of pace. In fact, he's gone deep into turn 9 and Timberlake sniffing a gap there and not able to get alongside to try and go for the move. But at 106.0, we can see that Dako just doesn't quite have as much pace as the guys up in front. And I should point out, ladies and gentlemen, that Marky Boy is already responding to Hirokram's push in the fact that he has set the new fastest lap on lap 11 of a 105.6. So Marky Boy, with that gap now coming down to 2 seconds, is up in the game a little bit, the Club 100 driver here. And I think what his intention is, he is pacing himself to the guys behind him. So if Hirokram suddenly sets a 105.7, Marky Boy will set a 105.65. He's going to try and frustrate the guys behind and manage his pace according to the pace of the drivers behind him. It's a very effective strategy when you're the race leader and you've got a gap you can juggle, because you only frustrate the guys behind you even more. And speaking about frustration, look at Fubuki, who's fallen back into the battle for P7 and 8, with the fact that Kuska now has got a bit closer. Now, whether that was a mistake, alternative Kuska and Hatalad have got a move on right now. We can't be 100% sure, but what we are certain of is that Fubuki is not safe from Kuska getting the toe off of the back of his car right now. And in fact, Kuska putting a move on right now and trying to get a little bit further out, and I think he's conscious of the fact he has got Hatalad getting ever closer behind him as he cuts onto the curb there at turn 9. And it's anyone's guess right now in terms of who's going to be potentially making a mistake riding that curve at turn 9. You can get greedy with it and see the car spin, but for the time being, everybody keeping it relatively clean. As we see, there has been an incident much further back on the field, and it's Noodlester who's got it wrong at turn number 6. Just went off onto the grass a little bit there. But as we cut away from Noodlester for now, we can see that Fubuki has pulled away on Kuska actually. So Kuska made a mistake at turn 1 because he's pulled half a second on Kuska, and Kuska in fact finding Hatalad all over the back of him as we jump to the onboard with Hatalad's car here. And what you can see, as we see also telemetry data, is Hatalad really taking a lot of life out of that front left tyre, so heavy on the brakes, as was Kuska to an extent. But Hatalad here, you can see he's being very aggressive under braking into the corners, not doing initial heavy braking and trailing it off, no, just simply stamping on the brakes, stopping the car and getting back on the power. And I think what it is, he is really trying to put some pressure on the Irishman in front of him and just simply trying to find a way of getting Kuska to make a mistake so that way he can be in a position to make a move going forward. But he is pushing after him, and as they're making their way around onto what is lap number 14, what we can see is behind them, Moz, the gap is now 1.5 seconds between Moz and Hatalad. So Moz falling away from this right now, but he's got a good gap on Ben Cosgrove, who we should point out has actually broken away from TRG's Gaz. Now, earlier on, we did see that Gaz was getting ever closer to the back of Ben Cosgrove's car, but Ben seems to have found a bit of pace, and perhaps Gaz has also made a mistake somewhere out on circuit. We can't underestimate either factor here, but what the net effect is, Ben now in the top 10 position and just finding himself breaking a little bit away from the chasing TRG driver. And this is nice for Ben because it gives him more options as he goes on, and he can focus more on just his general racing. And further back, we can see that in the battle for P12, Aldo is catching up to the back of Racing Snake, and he's getting a little bit closer with each lap at the moment, but I think a move's not going to be on for some time. Now, as we hop further back up towards the front, we can see that Marky Boy, again, with that 2.1 second gap over Hirokram, and Hiro at this point, well, 1.5 second gap over Dako. Dako has got away from Timberlake to an extent, albeit you can see that Timberlake is still in that slipstream, that 0.75 second slipstream zone, just about coming out that final corner. So I think Dako is now trying to get a move on, and Timberlake's also got one eye in his rearview mirror of what H Racing Green is trying to achieve by getting past him up into P4. So I think Timberlake is looking forward with one eye, looking behind with the other eye, and it's just giving Dako a little bit of breathing room to try and and break away, as we see that the fastest lap has now dropped to a 105.612, 621 if I could read my numbers correctly, in the form of Marky Boy. So Marky Boy really controlling the pace of this race right now as race leader, and Hirokram responding by just putting in some good laps and then settling into a rhythm of his own. So it is a little bit quiet at the moment, folks, but as I say, we've still got half the race to go. We've still got 14 minutes remaining, so we could see anything at any point so far. Mistakes can still be made, and as we do a quick review of the field, what we can see is that Fubuki has definitely pulled a gap on Kuska here, but Kuska doing everything he needs to right now to hold off Hatalab behind, although Kuska goes out a bit deep on exit, coming out of the turn 8 hairpin there. And you can see that Hatalad is actually responding to that. He's got a much better exit out of the corner, but he's too far back to be able to make a run into turn 9. And that's one of the things as well with Tsukuba. Unless you're running really fast cars around this circuit, as we can see. In fact, hold on a second. Racing Green has got past Timberlake. But you can see that Timberlake is going to come back and Racing Green go defensive to the inside there into turn 1. But we're going to see if we can find out what happened, whether it was a move into turn 9. But Racing Green are now up into 4th place and continuing his campaign after the podium. So we're going to see if we can check on what happened. So coming up in towards turn 9 then, I think it was just a case that Timberlake did not have the best of runs out of 8, and that meant Racing Green could just go full send into turn 9, and indeed it's the standard move on the inside, and he's made it count. So the driver up into P4 and now pushing further along and going after Dako. And you can see that gap between the Brit and the Croatian has come down from 1.3 seconds at the start of this lap to 1.1 seconds already, and I think Racing Green is on a mission here to try and get onto that podium step. He sees the podium and he's going for it to his utmost. Behind, no change in terms of position right now for the battle for P6, 7 and 8. And as we look further down the field, we can see that Moz still doing enough to stay away from Ben Cosgrove and not catching up to Hatalad in front of him. And as we look to Ben Cosgrove here, you can see that he's just holding off the fast charging TRG Gaz, who's not able to get back in that slipstream zone just yet. But now Tywear's starting to come in. You can see some drivers are starting to understeer a little bit into turn 9 in particular with that fast right-hander. But as we look up the field once again, we can see that in the battle for P4, it's Racing Green now who's under pressure from Timberlake, and these two just seem to be nip and tuck away at one another on a non-stop basis here, and I think they're going to be trading places to the end. Oh, goodness me, and it looks so Timberlake, not Timberlake, sorry, Racing Green almost got it all sorts of wrong, as did Dako at the head of the camera there, as they both came out of turn 4, both started to feel the car sliding at the rear a little bit there when getting on the power. It hasn't quite got as much grip as it had previously, and also these cars are getting lightened out as they burnt more and more fuel. So it could be anyone's guess at what point the car starts to become quite snappy out the corners, as we can see Racing Stake in the battle for P12 with P1 Aldo, just holding off Aldo right now, but it could change at a moment's notice for the fact the gap between these two has been coming down, and it's been found to be within that 3 to 4 tenths region for the last couple of laps. So Aldo sizing up Racing Snake here, and I think he may have a move on with Racing Snake, getting the worst possible acceleration he could get out of turn 8 there, and as they're charging up towards turn number 9, is Racing Snake going to go defensive? He does indeed move to the defensive line here. And, well, it looks as though Aldo does not try and hang it around the outside. He just simply backs off and waits for the next opportunity. But up front, Marky Boy is still leading ahead of Hirokram. And we can see that Dako in P3 still holding on to that third place position ahead of Racing Green, who's got Timberlake all over the back of him. And I think Timberlake wants a really good sniff of the exhaust fumes out of that Clio in front of him, because he's all over the back of it like a bad rash. And I think he wants that P4 back as soon as humanly possible. And behind them, Fubuki doing enough to pull away from Kuska. And in fact, well, I say that, Kuska has fallen down to P8, Hatalad is up into P7, and Kuska, I think, maybe coming back for a move here. Look how close he is to the back of the British driver's rear end as they're coming up towards turn 8, and is Kuska going to send it for a cutback here? So he's going to go deep initially and then try and go for that cutback on exit, and I think Hatalad has got the perfect run through the corner, and I don't think Kuska's going to have a response here, but we missed the overtake from Hatalad on camera. But let's just wait and see. Will Kuska go for a move here up into turn 9? I don't think so. I think he's too far back to attempt it. And as they come to the end of lap 18, let's see if we can find out what happened. It looks as though Hatalad got the move done in the run into turn 1, because he was already alongside Kuska when they were coming up in towards turn 4. So I think the same may happen. Perhaps Kuska got it wrong out of 9, and that meant Hatalad had the run up into turn 1 on the next lap. So that's how it's all changed there. And as we look further up the field, further down the field, Racing State going once again defensive against Aldo. Aldo getting closer, and Racing State's gone deep into turn 1, and Aldo just simply says, "Thank you, Racing State, for giving me the space on the inside. I'll go for the move." But Will Racing Snake try and make a comeback here in the Renault Sportmobile as he comes side by side? They're going side by side into turn 4, and Racing Snake's going to hold it there, and Aldo going for a cutback once again, but Racing Snake planted it very well on the defensive line there, and in fact he makes Aldo hold all the way around the outside, but you have the inside into turn 5. They're staying side by side into turn 5 and out of it, and they're giving each other great room. Neither driver wants to give it up, but Racing Snake has that momentum through 6 and 7, unless Aldo goes for a back send here into turn 8, which he's right to do, and he's going to go for the send is Aldo, and Racing Snake I think could have gone defensive there to try and shut it off, but in return Aldo and Racing Snake are going to still be drag racing up towards the final corner on lap number 19. Which one of them is going to emerge ahead? It's anyone's guess right now, but I think Aldo's just done enough. He's going to have the run and he's going to have the inside, and Racing Snake, unless he hangs it around the outside and finds some magical grip, Aldo has consolidated P12 for the time being. As we look back towards our leaders who are on lap 20 right now, we can see that Noodlester is being lapped by our leaders, but still good on Noodlester for staying in this race and doing his best, as Hirokram in P2 behind Marky Boy 92. Then we've got Dako, who's still in P3 ahead of H Racing Green, and Timberlake, who's charging after H Racing in P5. We've got Fubuki in P6 as we go all through in the camera shot here, ahead of Hatalad, and Kuska in P8 right now, trying to get back past Hatalad. And then P9, we've got Moz ahead of Ben Cosgrove, who's definitely pulling a little bit away from Gaz. Gaz starting to find some of that pace fall off a little bit. It hasn't been a great race for Gaz. It's been an unfortunate one after that incident earlier on where he saw himself doing rallycross out of turn 5 and 6. Aldo in P12 now. He's consolidated that position. I can confirm it ahead of Racing Snake, although Racing Snake may be looking to come back at him at some point as the drag race recommences into turn 9 here. But Aldo going defensive initially, putting himself in the middle of the track, effectively saying to what is Racing Snake behind him, look, if you're going to go for the move, you need to be a lot closer than this, my friend. And Noodlester in P14 being lapped by our top 5 right now. Now, of course, at this point, it's always good to do a quick telemetry check to see what our drivers' tyres are and their fuel. We can see that Marky Boy has got a quarter of a fuel tank remaining, and that should be enough to get him to the end, albeit his tyre wear is very heavy on his front left tyre in particular. Meanwhile, the NXGN Hirokram driver is doing a fantastic job of tyre management. Whilst he's on the same amount of fuel, 25%, he's barely taken any life out of any of his tyres, to be honest. Those are some very clean tyres, and they've got a lot of pace in them, and in fact he could be trying to gain on Marky Boy right now. Meanwhile, Dako on heavily worn tyres, much like our leader, albeit the fuel's about the same as the other two. H Racing Green on a bit less fuel and similar tyre life as our Hirokram, in fact, so he's been doing a lot of tyre saving. And meanwhile, behind him, Timberlake in a very similar position, in fact, has got a good amount of fuel as well to go. So Timberlake is going to be the one with a lot of pace to unleash towards the end of this one, I definitely reckon, with under 7 minutes to go. And he's not looking for the move just yet into turn 1. As they're coming up through the corner here, and Racing Green holding on for dear life at the moment as Timberlake is getting away with the back of him. In P6, Fubuki got a good amount of fuel remaining and good tyre life remaining. Hatalad has really heavily dug into that front left tyre, and look at the fuel on Hatalad's car as well. He has been pushing non-stop, as has Kuska in terms of the tyre life, but the fuel is in a very good state. Meanwhile, Moz, well, he's barely driven the car at all in terms of those tyres, but you can see that the fuel is definitely coming down. And Ben Cosgrove, in the meantime, actually in, well, similar situation to NXGN in P2 in terms of the condition of the car, in terms of tyre and fuel. And then we've got TRG Gaz, who has barely touched his tyres nor his fuel tanks. I think Gaz at this point has decided just to hang up the gloves in terms of going hunting and just manage the car to the end. And Aldo and Racing Snake in very similar states, albeit Aldo has got a lot less fuel by comparison with Racing Snake, so he hasn't got as much fuel he could utilise to his advantage into those final laps. And Noodlester, we shouldn't forget, well, he's on a lap down from a good number of our drivers now, but the car's in very good condition in terms of tyres and fuel. But as we look back up towards the field, towards the front of the field, I should say, Marky Boy right now doing everything he needs to do to bring this one home in terms of leading. In fact, 2.4 seconds ahead of NXGN Hirokram, and, well, just doing everything he needs to. He's matching Hirokram's pace, but in return, Hirokram is managing that car very well. As we said earlier, he has got a lot of tyre life and fuel life remaining. Dako behind, starting to get a bit closer to Hirokram at this point. I think Dako's starting to push a bit harder, and I think he's got H Racing Green and Timberlake who are pushing hard behind. I think those guys have decided that whilst Timberlake is all over the back of H Racing Green, they're going to only fight for that P4 position at the end of the race as they're trying to close that gap to the Croatian ahead of them. And well, if H Racing Green could get in the slipstream of the Croatian right now, it could turn the battle for P4 into a freeway battle for P3, which they'd love at the end. Meanwhile, for Buki in P6, 7.5 seconds down on our lead pack at the moment, effectively, but a good 1.6 seconds ahead of Hattelad in P7, who is 1.5 seconds ahead of Kuska. So I think Kuska has just simply fallen off a bit right now, as Moz is falling back into the clutches. Our P9 driver is falling back into the clutches of Ben Cosgrove. Ben Cosgrove here in P10 doing a fantastic job of actually keeping that car nice and clean and consistent and chasing after Moz here and trying to find a position at the end with under 5 minutes remaining. And well, I should look back up towards the front, in fact, because I think we have got, well, no, my apologies, I thought there was a move on it. It was Hattelad just simply passing Noodlestir there. As we see Ben Cosgrove at this point in time trying to put some pressure onto Moz, and then further behind we've got Gaz 2.1 seconds behind Ben and not closing up at a rate of knots at all. And Racing Stake is actually back ahead of Aldo, so these guys have changed place. And what has happened here? We got it done, I think, into turn 8 on the previous lap because he's already ahead going on to lap 24, so we missed that off camera with our summary of our drivers. But Aldo not having a clean run into P12 then right now. These two are going to continue trading places, I think, for the remaining 4 minutes. And it should be reminded, ladies and gentlemen, that our top 7 drivers tonight, i.e. P1 through to P7, will be going into the top split for next week's races, i.e. round 2, whereas our bottom 7 will be going into the bottom split. And of course, all of our drivers want to be in that top split because there's more points available, and you've got that shot at being in the grand final with our 5 best drivers going into that grand final at the very end of it. So all of our drivers who finish in P1 through to P7 today will be in the top split draw for next week's races, and the other 7 will be in that bottom split. As we see, there's only a few more laps remaining, so we've effectively got what is 4 more laps remaining for our lead drivers right now, or 3 laps remaining, I should say, after this one. And as they all come through turn number 5 then, and nobody really chopping and changing right now, but it does look as though Daco is falling back into the clutches of Racing Green. In fact, Racing Green has gained some considerable ground on the P4 driver. And as we look back from Daco right now, as we ride on board from the rear bumper, what you can see Racing Green is doing here, he's trying to essentially put that mental pressure on the Croatian driver. Daco, to be fair, is responding very well. He drives very consistently and does not mind the pressure. But what I think we'll see is in the braking zones, what Racing Green will try to do is find ways of changing his line to get in Daco's head. And you can see that through turn 9, Racing Green getting the better run out the corner as they both go to those limits. And I think Racing Green may try and look for a quick send here. In fact, he doesn't go for it, he parks it instead. And you can see he's gone deep into turn 1 intentionally to try and go for a cut back out the corner. And Racing Green is definitely sizing up a podium here, as we've only got a couple more laps to go. 2 minutes and 10 seconds to go. Timberlake having fallen off the back of this pack. And I should point out, meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, that Ben Cosgrove has got himself up into... Hold on a second, we've had a whole change of people because Kuska's up into P7. Somebody has fallen well back. What on earth has happened to Hattelad? He's dropped all the way down to P11. Hattelad came into pits, he ran out of fuel. That's a disaster for Hattelad, because, well, that goes to show you, by using that fuel up earlier in the race, he pushed too hard, and Hattelad's chances of finishing the top 7 are now to shreds. Goodness me. And some of our other drivers may be worrying about fuel at this point. I think Kuska's going to be okay, and I think Ben Cosgrove, who's got past Moz, and in fact, Ben here is on a charge up into P8, and Ben, having saved a bit more fuel than some of the other drivers around him, is the man on a mission. So fuel's going to be a huge factor now, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, as we come on to only come on, and Racing Green is into the pits on 0% fuel. He's pushed the car too hard, and that's going to drop him all the way down the order. I think he'll be safe, albeit the time loss for going in the pits here is approximately 8 to 10 seconds for just a tyre change, but that means Racing Green has dropped to P5, so he will be safe. But that is something that's going to be causing so many fixer drivers to panic about right now. Could we see anybody else making an emergency pit stop as we go deeper and deeper in? But one thing for certain, folks, that releases Daco to finish on the podium so long as he doesn't run out of fuel. And we're just going to do a quick fuel check around our drivers here, as we'll see that we've got 40 seconds to go. I think all of our leaders will be making it home on their fuel right now. Racing Green, of course, putting some fuel in. Kuska is going to be marginal, I think, although he has got some gap to play with if he wants to do fuel sand. And Ben Cosgrove is also very marginal, as is Moz, but TRG Gaz has got a huge amount of fuel remaining, so I think Gaz could actually be... In fact, Gaz is going to go for the move. Moz is fuel saving, and that means Gaz is going to go for the move into P9. There's a bit of contact, but it's all drama at the very final couple of laps, as we're going to see these drivers come across to complete their race very shortly. But it's going to be as... Well, Timberlake comes into pits, so Racing Green will be doing a 28th lap, as will be Fubuki. But I think Kuska here is going to be the first driver to finish their race on lap 27. It is Kuska coming home in P7 after that tough battle with Hatter. Then it's Ben Cosgrove in P8. TRG Gaz coming home in P9 after Moz running out of fuel and actually running out of fuel on the line, and Hatter's just going to miss out on that P10 as Hatter comes home in P11. We're going to have Racing State coming home ahead of Aldo in the end in P12 after some fantastic battling between the two, and I think Aldo's actually had to go for a pit stop at some point because Racing State has run out of fuel on the finish line. Aldo's run out of fuel as well. Oh goodness me, these drivers all literally going marginal on their fuel tanks, and for good reason. Wow. As Aldo's going to come across the line very shortly. And I don't think we're going to see any more changes up ahead. So Aldo across the line in P13. But coming out the final corner then, having dominated from start to finish, it is Marky Boy 92 bringing it home in P1. Behind him it'll be Hiroko in P2. Ahead of Dako P3. And then behind these guys, started off P4, it'll be Timberlake. And then round off our top 5 is H Racing Green after that emergency pit stop. And rounding off our racing field in P6, it is Fubuki. Congratulations to all of our drivers, but most importantly, congratulations once again to Marky Boy 92 from the United Kingdom. What a dramatic end to the race. I mean, when we saw at the start just how much fuel our drivers had after the opening 10 minutes, when I saw that all of our drivers had about 70 to 75% fuel tanks, I thought honestly that they had enough to get to the end. But as they went deeper and deeper in, I think what it was, our drivers started to push, but in doing so, they started burning so much fuel in their cars, and it was too much for some to handle, to the point that they had to make that emergency pit stop for fuel. But after 30 minutes, our classification is as follows. Marky Boy 92 bringing it home on the top step, ahead of NXGN's Hirokram in P2 and Dako 1993 rounding off our podium, with the gap between P1 and P3 being 1.7 seconds in the end. P1's Timberlake, unfortunate to miss out on a podium step there with that 4th place, ahead of H Racing Green with that emergency pit stop rounding off our top 5. And then the rest of the field may be seen up there. But our top 7 drivers will be going through to the top split for round number 2. So alongside our top 5, as we mentioned, it will also be Fubuki 2007 and Jeff Kuska 321 who are making it through to the top split. Meanwhile, Ben Cosgrove, TRG Gaz, Moz 1978, Hatterlad, Racing Snake 79, P1 Aldo and Noodlester 9 will be going down to the bottom split for round 2. Our fastest lap was set on lap 25 by H Racing Green 91, a 105.553. Our fastest lap that we saw in the race, and I believe the fastest lap that we have seen over the course of the racing and the qualifying sessions tonight. But with that, we're just going to throw a quick question over to whether any of our drivers would be interested in having a post-race interview. Just see if any of our drivers want to talk a little bit about their experience in the race. And I could appreciate that some of our drivers right now are a bit frustrated with the fact that this was a little bit of a fuel-saving race or a fuel management race. But sometimes that's what makes a difference in terms of winning and being a bit further down, is that fuel management aspect. And it caught some of our drivers out today, but all of our drivers raced fantastically throughout. And you can imagine that round 2 next week is going to be even closer as we just double check to make sure that we save that replay. But yes, we can definitely say that Marky Boy had a very, very strong control over the race. And that was the important thing. You'll note that what Marky Boy did was he just did enough to break himself away from the field and gave himself a nice bit of space. That gap it contracted, it expanded throughout. But the thing about the gap that he had, he always managed it and monitored the gap to the drivers behind. And that's what led to some drivers pushing their cars a bit too hard, perhaps, and then losing out the engine. You'll notice that Hirokram at the end backed it off a bit, recognising that Marky Boy was doing that management and just simply frustrating everyone. But we are going to see if Hirokram would be up for an interview. Or in fact, Ben Cosgrove, I think, has said that he'd be up for it. We'll start off with Ben. I can use my keyboard to type here rather than the controller. Just give all of our drivers a little bit of a breather as well, just let them come down. Just be some quick interviews for those who are interested. And there were some great fights up and down the field. I mean, the battle between Fubuki, Casca, and Hatalad in the battle for P6, P7, and P8, that was a great one with that surprise moment where Hatalad had to pit. And of course, we had that fantastic battle between P1 Timberlake and also, what's his name, H Racing Green for P4. We're just waiting for Ben to get back to us. In fact, we'll ask our... I think Dako's just left, which is unfortunate, and Marky Boy has just left. Everybody's jumping out. So Casca's not going to be able to do an interview because he's got no headphones, so that's no problem. We can always catch him again. So we just have to be a little bit patient because I know a number of our drivers are blowing a lot of steam off at the moment. It'd be great if we could get Hero Cram to come on, because it'd be good to hear from his perspective. I don't think anybody's up for an interview today. It's no problem. Just make sure we're just going to check off screen in case we had any messages. Nope, that's fine. Alrighty, folks. Well, we're going to give our drivers just 2 more minutes just in case anybody who's remaining does want to do a quick interview. But otherwise, I think we're going to be calling it there. I think they're all they're discussing the whole flat out versus non-flat out in this race, which is fair enough. I would also love to have heard a little bit from Aldo and Racing Snake from their battle for P12, because whilst it was further down the field, they were really respectful to one another. Some fantastic racing throughout. All right, well, we are going to call it there. I don't think anybody's up for an interview tonight. I know Kuska said he's not able to because he hasn't got a headset. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this one. It's been a pleasure to bring you a Lobby C for the opening round of the MRC Mega Team versus Team February 2021 competition. And I look forward to bringing you even more action next week at the same time, 2100 UTC. Well, we start the show at 8:45 UTC in the evening. Plenty of action where we head over to what is, if I check my notes, in terms of the circuits. I know we head over to drive in Peugeot RCZs, but in terms of the circuit we go to, I think that looks like Interlagos. Although my eyes are probably deceiving me. No, it's Bathurst. It's Bathurst. So we're heading over to Bathurst in a week's time for another load of frantic action where next time out we are going to have what is our 11 drivers. So our 11 drivers who have made it through. Well, we've got 20... Sorry, I say 11 drivers. We're going to have 21 drivers who make it into the top split. One of the lobbies will consist of 10 drivers, the other of 11 within top split. We'll be commentating one of those and seeing what kicks off in round 2. Be sure to come back. It'll be fast, frantic and ferocious. But we'll catch you on the flip side. Until then, stay safe, stay well, stay smiling. But most importantly, as always, stay on track. Good night.